And now presenting the critical crocodile himself, Croc, performing one of Shakespeare's most famous monologues.
To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms of empowerment and... Wait, what was that last bit? What last bit? That last bit. The bit about empowerment, what was that? What are you talking about? That was Shakespeare. What are you That wasn't Shakespeare, that was you. It was Shakespeare, I tell you. You can't just change Shakespeare just to suit you. I was doing Shakespeare. I was just doing my personal opinion on it. Well, you can't just change it, otherwise it's no longer Shakespeare. That's not what Shakespeare was writing that monologue about. Of course it was. It was all what he was writing about. That monologue originally was too dull and too drab. We have to bring it into the 21st century. But Shakespeare wrote it during his day. He wasn't writing it to make a political statement. He was writing it about death. That's what the monologue was about. Death. Bigot. Oh, for goodness sake. G'day little nippers, and welcome to our first ever TV series review. But before we get on to that, TV and film seems to be entering a rather bizarre phase right now. And what I mean by that is they seem to be focusing more on social messaging and what's currently popular today, rather than focusing on what should be focused on, telling a decent, timeless story. Star Wars has begun doing it, Star Trek is currently doing it, Humans, Doctor Who, Outlander, almost every single Disney princess remake. These series and films seem to be putting more value in social impact on a modern audience, rather than focusing on what anyone of that time or place should be doing in a story. And no more can I think a better example than a Netflix original series called Anne with an E. First thing we climb a tree. I already have an issue. This title sequence is one of the strangest I have ever seen in a TV opening. I don't know, something about the colour mixture of imagery and music they've used just has a really disturbing undertone. I can't quite put my claw on it. The feminine design should be illustrative of how sweet and wonderful Anne's mind is, but this design, rather than allowing us to see into a magical world of imagination, which Anne has, is really aggressively thrown at the audience in blunt and brittle woodland colours of brown and dark greens and mustard yellows, rather than the bright and colourful reds, light blues and pinks. Anyway, that aside, based on the Anne of Green Gables book series by L.M. Montgomery, the first season of this Netflix show seemed to go by pretty much as it should. Introducing the characters, establishing a flowing narrative and arc for each one of the many characters, just like Montgomery did in her books. The only real problem I had with the first season, besides the opening credits, was that the actress playing Anne was a little older than I was expecting. But really it's a nitpick at best. The first season ended, and I have to say, the shots were beautiful and professionally done, the tone of the 1870s feel was solid, and people were acting the way people of that time probably would have acted. Besides Anne, I guess. But the whole point of the book was showing just how outward and free-spirited she was, and in many ways, the first season of this show made Anne and the rest of the fictional town of Avonlea a great character. There were hiccups every now and then, but otherwise it was a good season. I really started to enjoy it. But I think I should have paid more attention to the hiccups because a couple of episodes into season 2 and the true face of what the directors were trying to do was made clear. Noble characters like Aunt Josephine, who in the book taught Anne to be thankful for her friendship with Diana and demonstrated the power of friendship when her dear friend died. Netflix made her and her friend lovers.
Wait a second. Before we attack each other and tear ourselves to shreds like a pack of maniacs, let's just open the sack first and see what's actually in it. It might not even be worth the trouble.
Clumsy creative decisions like this seem to start an avalanche of plot holes. Every obstacle Anne faced from then on seemed to be the equivalent of a Saturday morning cartoon villain twiddling his moustache and cackling.
Okay, it's worth it.
It became hard to stomach at times at how obvious this season was appealing to a 21st century audience and not holding true to the values that would not exist for at least 160 years. It just came across as white noise, and so many elements of the book were dropped out completely for things that didn't even happen. I quite frankly found the second season contrived, and nothing at all reminiscent of the types of lessons that Montgomery intended when writing the book.
Okay, it's worth it.
One thing I will say for the series as a whole is that it at least tried to get a dark realism to mix into Anne's views of the world, but it goes in the completely wrong direction and makes everyone just come across as a villain. Bottom line, people just don't care about issues like this. Both in the 1870s when this was set, and even today, people just don't care. The kind of people who make seasons like this with no regard for the original material want to play on people's current emotions of the day to make their creation pass.
What's my final score?
6.
Woo! And how many do I need to pass?
6.
Ooh.
100.
What's worse is that they do so in such a way that makes them think they're being bad and even bigoted people for not liking it. This kind of thinking is dangerous as it leads down a path that will eventually make us unable to like or dislike anything through fear of what others will think. And that isn't the way people should view film or TV. Film and TV are art forms, free for interpretation. But that interpretation needs to have some kind of roots in reality. And when you have basic issues like spoken language of the 1870s spoken like a 21st century kid, realism simply has nowhere to go. Nowhere to go from that. Overall, this series was well shot, establishes characters, arcs and plot in a well-told way, most of the time, and at least tries, albeit in a clumsy way, to show a clever mixture of book references and dark reality to set a unique identity tone, but in the end, it just failed. The social messaging simply became too much for me to properly connect with, and obviously seeks to become a series whose sole focus is more on outright lecturing an audience on progressive issues.
When girls can do anything a boy can do, and more, what if suddenly there were no boys in the world? None at all.
Rather than being clever and focusing on the story itself to let you make up your own mind. I score this 3 out of 10 Croc points.
I beg your pardon?
Beautifully shot and beautifully directed, but unfortunately the contrived and unnecessary social lecturing on things we already know will date this series in the years to come very badly. Take care, little nippers. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and, if you can, support me on Patreon. See you in a while, crocodiles.